Hi, my name's Geoff Luttrell. I own San Francisco Guitar Works and Sonoma County Guitar Works. I have over 20 years of experience in doing fretwork professionally. So I'm excited to share my expertise with you so that you can learn how to diagnose common fret issues and then learn how to level, crown, and polish your frets. Your strings could be buzzing when you play for a variety of reasons. You could have a setup that is done improperly. The guitar could have too much relief in the neck, causing buzzing in the middle registers. The action could just be too low. Your pick attack could be very heavy and causing buzzing at your current action height. Or you could have uneven frets up and down the board, or you could have localized high or low frets, depending on what kind of buzzing you're getting. So now that you've determined that your guitar has some fret issues that you need to address, there are certain ground rules that you'll want to make sure you follow before you get started. The first thing is that you want to make sure that the guitar or other fretted instrument is set up properly. You want to make sure you've gone through your neck relief, your bridge action, make sure that all that's done correctly so you're diagnosing an actual fret issue, not a setup issue. Another thing to remember is that the process is the same no matter what the fretted instrument is, whether it's a bass, a mandolin, a guitar, a banjo. You want to make sure that you have it set up correctly, and you'll use the same set of diagnostic processes and the same tools for all the instruments. What's great is that MusicNomad has created the Keep It Simple setup method, so you can quickly go in, set your guitar up correctly, make it play the way you want it to, and then you can assess the instrument for fret buzz after it's properly set up. So I've just set up this Fender Strat with the MusicNomad Keep It Simple setup method. Got the action specs where I want it. It's nice low action, neck relief is set, bridge radius, nut heights, everything's dialed. So now I'm going to go ahead and check the guitar for any fret buzz issues by playing each note on each string individually. Now before I do that, I'm going to want to have a way to track if I have any buzzing notes on the neck. So there's a couple ways you can do that. A cool way to do it is on the MusicNomad website. They have a fret buzz tracker that you can use to log where your guitar is buzzing and if you have high or low frets. If you don't have access to that, you can just use a piece of paper. What I do is I'll write down my strings across E, A, D, G, B, E, assuming you are playing a guitar. And then I'll just write down below each one of those what fret is buzzing if I have any fret buzz issues. So that's a pretty simple way that you can kind of visualize how your fretwork is up and down the neck. So now that this guitar has been properly set up, I'm going to check it for fret buzz by playing each individual note on every string. So here we go. So far so good on the E. Oop, getting a little buzz there on the 3rd fret. So I'm going to go ahead and notate that. A string, I'm going to write a number 3 under that for my 3rd fret position was buzzing. Then on my D, same thing, 3rd fret on the D. Go ahead and write that while I'm there. Same thing, that 3rd fret on that G is pretty plinky. The 4th is not, so let's write a 3 there. Same thing, 3rd on that B. Onto the high E. This 3rd fret on that high E is bad as well. Sixteenth fret on the E as well. And that seems like it. So it looks like we got a lot of fret buzz at the 3rd fret, and then we've got some buzz right at the 16th fret on the high E. So now that I've checked for just individual note fret buzz, this guitar gets a lot of bending, so I'm going to go ahead and on the high E and B, or just wherever you happen to bend, you're going to want to really check those areas carefully. I'm going to just bend notes and see if that frets out. Not so far. So everything bends cleanly, and it's interesting that with this really buzzy E string on the 16th fret, it doesn't fret out when you bend. So that shows me that the high spot is right out on the end of the fret. So now that we have checked for fret buzz, found our 3rd fret notes are all pretty buzzy, and our 16th fret. So now that I've notated the areas where the guitar is buzzy, I'm going to use my fret rocker to determine what is actually happening at the frets. So the MusicNomad fret rocker, I really like the design of this. It's really easy to use. It has a rectangular shape, so it stays low to the fret, and the weight stays centered between your fingers. It doesn't ever feel tippy. It also has the added bonus of being an string action gauge. So you've got your string action gauge in inches and millimeters on both sides. We've got an action chart on here as well. And it just has a nice weight to it. So, I use this as my main action gauge as well as my fret rocker. So a really cool tool. So now with my fret rocker down at the 3rd fret, I know that my note is buzzing at the 3rd, which means my 4th fret is probably high. So now I'll check with the fret rocker to see if my 4th fret is high. I suspect it will be from the A string to the E just based on my buzz values, but we'll see. So here I go. I'm spanning 3 frets with the sort of medium edge of the fret rocker. And at the low E, I'm not getting, just the barest amount of rock, almost nothing. So I move over to the A. It's definitely getting a little more. D's got a fairly pronounced rock. B and E are all rocking. So now I know it's high, but let's have a look and see with my fret gauge, is it actually out of spec? So to determine that, I'm going to use my fret level gauge to see how big the gap is between the rocker and the fret top. So I'll put the gauge back on my 4th fret, and I'm going to rock it back to the 3rd fret and see if my gauge fits between the fret rocker and the 5th fret, and it does. So I'm definitely out of spec on my fret height. I'll check it again at the G string. It definitely goes between the 5th fret and the rocker. Now I'll come in from this side, check same thing. Yep, it goes through. Not quite as easily, but it definitely goes through. And then same thing on my high E. It definitely goes through. Not quite as easily, but it definitely makes it. My 4th fret is out of spec. It's too high. So now I'll check the seating to make sure that the fret is seated. And that's done by using my fret seating gauge. I'll take that and I'll just put it up against the fret crown and see if it slides underneath the fret crown, between the crown and the fingerboard. Now it doesn't, so that shows me that the fret is actually seated to the fretboard. It's just high, whether it's the wood, was not leveled exactly there when it was fretted, or something has swelled over time. But the fret is seated properly. It's just the fret is too high. So what you might find is that the fret seating gauge does slide under the fret crown. And so then you know that the fret crown is not seated totally to the fingerboard. Now, if that's the case, you're going to want to check to see if the fret is solidly in the fingerboard by using your fret rocker and tapping on the fret. Now, I can hear that this fret is solidly seated in the fretboard. If you have a fret where the crown is not seated, it might still be solidly in the fingerboard. Maybe it was not pressed fully and it was glued, so it's rigid, but it's still just a little bit high. Or you might find that when you tap the fret top, it sounds very hollow because the fret is loose and it's sprung up in the middle. Now, if the fret is loose and has sprung up, the best bet is to take your guitar to a competent shop and have your frets assessed because they may need to be pressed and glued. So now that we've verified that our 4th fret is high, I'm going to move up to my 16th fret that was quite buzzy on the high E, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use my fret rocker to check. I'm going to span 3 frets. And yes, it is quite high at the E string. It's a little bit high at the B, even though it wasn't buzzing, and it's not high at all at the G. So I'm going to take my my fret level gauge. I'm going to again put my rocker on at the 17th fret, because again, if it buzzes at the 16th fret note, it's probably the 17th fret that's high. So now I'll check at the 18th, and my gauge easily goes through. Same thing at the B string. Now the G, it does not go through. So my 18th fret at the G is properly leveled, but it's rising up at the B and the E string. So now I'm going to want to check the end to see if it's seated, because maybe that end has just popped up and it needs to be pressed. But I'm not getting any, my gauge does not go under at all. So my fret is properly seated, and just to double check everything, tapping that, and it's really solidly mounted, so I know that I can safely level that fret without it springing up and down. So the last step in my fret assessment is just to make sure that my frets are high enough to level. So in order to do that, I will use my fret height gauge in the fret gauge kit. To use that gauge, I'm going to put my fret rocker across the frets and put my gauge between the fretboard and the fret rocker, because I want to measure the distance between the fingerboard and the fret rocker, which is the same as the height of the fret. So this is a 24 thousandths inch thick gauge, which is definitely the lowest that you want to level your frets. And this goes through and has plenty of room. This has got, I mean, these are probably over 40 thousandths of an inch high in that area. And since I'm going to level up here, I will go ahead and do the same. Put that across, and I have got plenty of room. So I've got more than enough fret to level those two frets. So we've determined that this guitar has two high frets. And to level all these frets just to get rid of two problematic frets is just a lot of work, and frankly it's unnecessary if that's really the only problem that you have. So to help solve that problem, MusicNomad has come up with the U-File set, which is a really great tool for exactly this purpose. It's a small machine channel with a diamond grit in the center that is used to level one fret down to the exact level of the frets next to it. So what's really cool about this tool is that it has arrows on the side that shows exactly where the abrasive is. So whenever you have it on the fret, you can see exactly where the abrasive is, so you can definitely localize and level that fret accurately. Also, it fits under the string, so you can level the fret under the string, which is exactly where the problem is. So you don't have to take your strings off. You can level your fret quickly, and then you can pop the tool right out from under the string, and you can right then play the note and see if it's fixed the problem. So really a neat tool with the, again, a diamond abrasive. It's long lasting, and it leaves a nice smooth surface. Anytime you're using the U-File, it's like using the fret rocker. You want to make sure that it spans only 3 frets so that you're filing the fret that's in the middle. So for that purpose, it comes in 3 lengths. The longer length is going to work farther down the fretboard, the first 3 frets up to maybe the 7th or 8th fret. Then as you get farther up the fretboard, you can move down to the smaller sizes so that you can still span only 3 frets at a time to make sure that you're leveling that center fret only. So whenever you have the tool under the string, it's easy to move it with one hand, and you can go in a linear direction with the string, or you can move it from side to side if there's some reason that you're not able to go back and forth. You can move it side to side and file the fret down that way. So really super handy. Whenever you have just 1 or 2 high frets, this is the move. So we're going to come in here with this, and I'm going to go ahead and level down my 4th fret to the level of the 3rd and 5th frets. So to level this fret, I'm going to take my U-File, I'm going to put it under my A string at the 4th fret so that the abrasive is sitting on the 4th fret. I can see that my arrows are pointed on either side, and I'm just going to level that fret down until it skates and I don't feel any abrasive. It wasn't very high on the A string, but I can see that I made a little flat spot. I'm going to go ahead now under the D. You can hear that filing that fret down. And you want to just file just until it quits cutting. And that's how you're going to know that you've gone far enough. Now I'll move it over under the G. Now the B. And lastly, the E. So now I'll check with my fret rocker, see if I make progress. It's definitely almost no rock at all across. So to verify, I'll take my fret level gauge. Let's start over here. Well, the gauge fits. So let me hit that again. All right, so now we'll check my fret. There's just a tiny bit of movement. Let me check with my fret level gauge. Does not go under. But that's the cool thing about the U file is you cannot go too far. So you definitely want to go until you want to file until you feel no resistance, until it feels like it's just skating on the other frets, and then you know that you have got your fret level with the other two. So now having leveled that fret, and this is one of the cool things about the U file, I did it with the strings on, so now I can go in and check playability right away and not even have to wait or restring the guitar or anything like that. So I'm just going to pick it up and give it a play down in that position, and hopefully we're going to be all clean and good to go. Well, now I have a little bit of a buzz on the 4th fret on the high E. So all the other strings sounded good. Everything was very clean at the 3rd fret where it was buzzing before, but now it seems like mine moved up a little bit on the high E string. So now I need to check and see if I have now a high 5th fret. So I'm going to go ahead and cross out my 3 on the high E and put on a 4, and I'm going to go back through and do the same thing, but I'm going to be centered on the 5th fret. So let's take my fret rocker, put it across. Yeah, I've got a little bit of a high fret on that 5th fret. So it probably was the case is I have 2 high frets here. So whenever I lower down that 4th fret, now the 5th fret seems high. So I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing that I did with the U file, but on the 5th fret and level that down. So I'll take that and put it between. I've already measured my fret height, so I know I'm good, but I am going to measure my seating on that 5th fret and make sure that it is seated properly. And it is. So now I'll take my U file, put it under the string at the 5th fret. As soon as I feel like I'm just skating without any abrasive, go ahead and remove that. Get my fret rocker back out. Just the tiniest bit of rock. Hit it just one more time. Make sure I can see if I can just take that little bit out. Okay, so now the playing test again. Let's see what we have. Still a little plinky on that third fret. So what's happening here is I'm actually chasing 2 high frets down. So my 4th and 5th fret were both high. So I leveled my 4th down, but the 5th was high, so the 4th really isn't leveled all the way to the plane of the 3rd through the 6th fret. I may have to chase the 4th and 5th fret a couple of times to bring them both down to the level of the surrounding frets. So I'm going to go back in on my 4th fret, because now it reads as high again. I'm going to level it down. Touch more there. Just want to make sure you don't quit before you're done. So that's good, no rock. But now I'll check the 5th, and it has a little bit of rock. So now I'll level it back down. Okay, no rock on the 5th. Tiny bit on the 4th. So again, might have just a little back and forth on these. Okay, so let's double check my 4th and 5th frets. I'm getting no rock on my 4th, no rock on my 5th. So now I will just play the high E string. Let's see if I'm... Still got our 18th fret we got to worry about, but everything's good down in the low register. So now I'll do the same thing up on our 17th fret. So now the playability in the low register is very clean. It's good. We had a 3rd fret. We had our 4th fret was high almost all the way across the fret, and then I thought it was just the high 4th fret on the E string, but once I brought that down, I was buzzing on the next note up. So I realized that the 5th fret was high. So what really was happening is that there were 2 frets right next to each other that were both high. So I had to, as I lowered one, the next one would start rocking. Then I lower it, and the one before starts rocking. So you just have to chase them down to get them to be in the same plane as all the other frets. That's a hard one to diagnose beforehand because you're only going to notice the buzzing on the first high fret. The second high fret will not buzz whenever you play that note because it's high. So you'll just level the fret that you have found that's high, and if you have another issue where you're having some buzz, you just treat that as a separate situation, and you just go through the diagnostics just like we did on the first one. You measure, level, check your seating, and then everything should work out. So now we'll come up and address our 17th fret, which is high. That's going to be this one right here. So that is definitely buzzing on that 16th fret note. So I'm going to use a smaller U file, one that only spans the 3 frets there. So I'll use the medium size file, will be good for this. So I'm going to come in, I can feel the file rocking on the fret, so I know exactly what I need to level. So I'm going to come in here and level this down. I'm trying, not to hit the adjacent frets with the diamond. If you accidentally just catch it a little bit, you can just polish that out with the fret polisher, which I'll get to in a minute, but try not to do that. If you are having trouble with that, you can go side to side, and that'll keep the diamond between the between the frets, and you won't have any issues with hitting the adjacent frets. You know, you can go diagonal. It's kind of, there's a lot of flexibility with this tool. All right, so now that was skating. I couldn't feel any more abrasive, so I think that I'm done. Let me get in here and check with my rocker. Yeah, there's no rock at all on that. So now I can get in here and give it a playability test. So nice and clean. So that cleaned that up really well. So just like down below, we isolated the high fret, made sure that it was seated and was not loose, leveled it with the U file, and now we are going to crown these 3 frets using the S file. So to crown these frets, I'm going to go ahead and loosen the strings and move them off to the side, and then I'm going to use the MusicNomad S file to crown the areas that I leveled. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen the strings, get those out of the way. If you're using a cradle cube, you can pull your strings out of the way and just hook them down under the edges of the cradle cube. That'll keep that out of the way for you so you can get to the frets. This guitar has a locking nut behind the actual nut, which is kind of a pain because I don't want to take the strings all the way out, but it does make them a little harder to get around the fretboard. But as long as I loosen them enough, they move out of the way okay. If you had a Floyd Rose nut, you would want to take off the blocking blocks, just put them on the bench and you can get your strings out of the way. The only things that are problematic for moving the strings out of the way are either a locking nut that's separate from the actual nut like this, or if you have a Floyd Rose that has the lock bar behind it, because that keeps the 4 inner strings between 2 screws, so it's kind of hard to get them over out of the way. You might have to remove the nut, you might have to pull that lock bar if you can't get things out of the way enough, but it shouldn't be too tough. Now with my strings out of the way, I'm going to measure my fret width so I can determine which side of the S file to use. Now to do that, I'm going to use on my fret gauge, I'm going to use the very end of the handle has a little notch in it, and if that notch fits down over the fret and the gauge touches the fingerboard, I'll know that I have a narrow to medium size fret. If I put the gauge down over the fret and it sits on the fret and it doesn't touch the fingerboard, then I'm going to know I have a wide fret. So that is how I will determine what side of the file to use. So when I put this down over the fret, it does not touch the fingerboard. There's quite a gap between the bottom of the gauge and the fingerboard. So I know that I have a wide fret. So I'm going to take my S file and I'm going to look and see wide. So I'm going to use the wide side. So I've used a bunch of different crowning files over my career. I mean, every one that you can imagine, from triangle files to other diamond coated files. And the S file is by far the best file that I've used. It has a lot of really neat innovations. It's very ergonomic. It has an offset design so that you can hold the file with your hand back at the back of the file and utilize the entire cutting surface of the working edge. It has a safe zone in the middle, which is really revolutionary. That has the effect of stopping the cutting as soon as the file touches the top of the fret. And that's one of the biggest challenges to learning how to do a fret level and crown, is knowing how to crown the frets without lowering the tops. The top of the fret, the height is critical. So with the safe zone, you're automatically stopped when you reach that point. So it makes it really easy to learn and it makes it pretty foolproof. The nose of the file is curved, so you can hit small spots, and it has a little line showing where the apex of the curve is, so you know exactly what part of the file you're using. So, really, really cool file. The way that you use it is it has a channel. It's a concave channel, and that's the shape the fret is going to be when you're done filing. So you'll take your S file and you'll put it down on the fret, and so I have my wide side. Put it down on the fret, and then I'm going to just file back and forth. And I can hear it's cutting. I can see metal dust falling off. And I'm going to do that until I feel the file stop cutting and start skating on the fret top. Now I can already feel that happening over here on the bass side. and I didn't level anything on the bass side, so it was already pretty crowned. So I'm going to focus up here on the treble side. I can hear it's skating on the bass side. In order to file the different parts of the fret, you need to raise and lower your hand to change the arc of the file as it goes across. So if I set the file flat on the fretboard and I file back and forth, I'm going to be filing in the middle of the fret. If I raise up my hand a little bit, now I'm filing on the treble side of the fret. If I drop my hand a little bit, now I'm filing on the bass side. So you're going to need to sort of make an arc going across the fret in order to get all the parts of the fret. So I can feel that I've pretty much done all the work I need to do through the middle, but the end is still a little bit cutting. All right, so now I felt that safe zone. Just make doubly sure. Safe zone's hitting all the way across the fret, so I know I'm done filing on that one. I'm going to move up to my 5th fret. Same thing. Now, just so you all know, these frets are a little bit flat on their tops, so even on the part that I didn't level, it's recrowning the fret. So I'm just going to go ahead and go with it and just recrown the whole fret. If you have frets that are not worn, they're perfectly crowned, but they're just a little out of level, and you do a level, you'll find that the safe zone hits the top of the fret pretty much immediately in the area that you didn't level. So these frets being a little bit flat, I'm getting a little bit of cut on the side that I didn't level, but that's okay. It's just crowning it out properly. All right, that feels good on that. I think I've hit everything I need to there. You can hear that's not cutting, which is making a skating sound. And so now I'll go up to my my 17th fret. To the very end of it. And if you're new to doing it, you can check your progress by looking, and you can see where you're filing, because the flat spot on the top of the fret will get progressively narrower. So if you're a little unsure about where you're cutting, even though the safe zone will stop you, it's not a bad idea to have some idea about how you're handling the tool. So a little visual check here and there isn't a bad move. All right, just about got that all crowned out. Okay, so now the safe zone skating on that one as well. So now that the fret is leveled and crowned, I'm going to go ahead and polish it using the tracer fret eraser system. So this is a great system for fret polishing. It's a handle. It's got rubber on the sides that come to a nice point, so you can get right down in the corner of the fret and get all the way down on the edge. It's a concave surface, so it cups the top of the fret and really gets a good polish that way. And it comes with 4 different grits of micro mesh. So you labeled 1 to 4. So you start with number 1, which is the coarsest, move up to number 4, which is the finest, and it will really polish the frets out to a mirror shine. It's super easy to use. You just slide the handle open, and then you slide the micro mesh on to the handle, and then the rubber retracts and tightens up the micro mesh. And then you use it just like you did with the S-file. You just put it on the fret, move it back and forth, and polish the fret. Now, to polish the fret out, you'll use your tracer fret eraser and a grip guard to protect your fretboard. And you'll just put the grip guard over your fret, protecting the fretboard, and then just use your tracer fret eraser to go back and forth across the fret. You can get right down against the fretboard, really go over it well to get that thing nice and shiny. Then I'll go up to my next fret, which I also crowned, my 5th fret. lastly, my 17th fret. All right, now over to number 2. Now, if you have a guitar like this one that has some other fret wear and some flat spots and stuff, you're probably going to find that the frets that you worked on are the best looking frets on the guitar. But you know, this guitar doesn't really need a full fret level right now. You know, this guitar is going to be fine playing until it actually needs a full fret level and dress. And at that time, then you can go in, you do the full fret level, full crown and polish, and then all the frets will look amazing. Actually, what I'll do after I finish up with these 3 frets, I'll get out my MusicNomad Fine fret polishing kit, and I'll go over the rest of the frets, and they'll gleam like these do. They won't be as nicely crowned, but they'll all be really shiny and look really good. So you will have done a really good maintenance project on your guitar, taking care of some fret buzzing issues, got some high frets leveled down, and made everything look nice and shiny. So now let's clean off my fretboard, take care of any. So whenever you do clean your frets, polish and crown and everything, you're going to find that there's going to be just a little bit of fret dust alongside the frets. So like I said, a little bit of F1 oil alongside the frets is going to clean that right up, and you won't be bothered by that at all. Main thing is, when you're done with this, you can sit back and look at it and think, that was a job well done. Want to make sure everything's really pretty, really shiny, really clean. Okay, now I'll string it back up to pitch, and I am done with this guitar. So as you've seen on a guitar that has a couple of just localized, obvious fret buzz issues, a spot leveling is really a good way to go. Since the other divoting and flat spots weren't causing any playability issues, a full fret level is really not necessary, so it would have been a lot of extra time for not a lot of extra result. So using the U files, the S file, and then the tracer fret eraser made quick work of those high frets, and now this guitar plays cleanly everywhere.
For more videos on how to perform guitar setups or care for your frets, subscribe to our channel and visit musicnomadcare.com for all our products and how-to videos.